Okay, good morning. We're going to go ahead and start. My name is Ms. Josafat, and I represent Special Services today. That just means that I'm a former classroom teacher, and I now work at the district office as one of the resource teachers. And so that's where I'm coming to you from. I'm going to be navigating both virtual and then in person, so I apologize in advance for any bumps. It's definitely a new endeavor for me. Today, my goal for this conversation is to help us get our students to become independent, empowered self-advocates, right? Like that's what we want for our kids. I think that's a common goal that we have from a school and then from a parent perspective, is we want our kids to be independent, we want them to be empowered, and we want them to be a self-advocate. So what does that even mean to be, a self-advocate? What would you say, parents? What's a self-advocate?
To advocate for themselves.
Yeah. Ask questions. Speak up. Right? Okay. I'm coming to you today from the lens of being a classroom teacher for about 14 years, and now my role is I specialize in transition. And so that's been a passion area for me for the last 6 years. But I'm also a mom. And so, of course, our lens that we come together today depends on our experience, right? Our experiences that we've been through, all that stuff. So that's kind of the lens that I'm coming to you from. My lens is very different than it was 14 years ago when I was in the classroom, because now I've seen a lot of outcomes for my students, and now I'm focused specifically on transition. And so it's become a real passion topic for me because I think I figured out the magic sauce for our students being more successful after high school. And it comes down to self-advocacy. That is the magic sweet spot. So I think that we talked about our common goals, like parents, teachers, schools, we want the same thing. We want happiness for our kids, right? We want success, we want independence. We want the same things. And I think I like to remind ourselves of that because sometimes it can feel, there's can be sometimes some tension between schools and families, but really the goal is shared, right? We want the same thing. I know I do. I feel like I fight real hard for my students. So I'm going to share with you a lot of my personal experience and then a lot of what I've learned in terms of data. I know some people are really into data. I'm more of a people person. I'm more like a storyteller. But I know there's a lot of people that respond to data. So here's what the data tells us. And this conversation, of course, lies heavily in students with disabilities, right? That's kind of why we're here today, right? So students with disabilities, here's what the data is telling us. After high school, we have 24% of our students are disclosing disability. So that means they go to their Southwestern College or wherever they go to next and they say, I am a person with a disability, they link up the services, and they're off. 69% no longer consider themselves to have a disability after high school. Where did it go? It doesn't go away. So they are not disclosing. 7% say, okay, yeah, I have a disability, but I'm not disclosing. But there's a whole underlying story to that. And I can tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. So, but here's some more data. Students with disabilities who disclose their disability after their first year of college. So they go to Southwestern or they go to San Diego State or wherever they go, and they don't disclose until after their first year of college, have significantly lower graduation rates than students with disabilities who disclose within the first year of enrollment. And I'd like to say, gosh, what if we disclose proactively? What kind of data can we get out of that? A proactive disclosure.
Can you share your screen?
It's not sharing?
Can you double check?
I don't know.
I think it's 20. Let's just double check. Share screen.
Share the tab.
Did you see it back there?
What was the option to share tab? Sure, John.
Any questions? Ask me.
So imagine, thank you, if we disclose proactively what it could look like. And here's the thing though, our students aren't doing it, but also we're not teaching them how to do it. We're not teaching them why we need to do it. Every year that a student disclosed disability, the length of time to graduation increased by almost half a year. Many of my students will say, but Ms. Josafat, I don't want to be a person with a disability. I don't want that to be my identity. I'm more than that. Absolutely. But it's still part of us. And it's significant enough that it has given us an IEP. Right? If it was just a minor slight thing, we probably would compensate. We've never qualified for an IEP. Life would have gone on. But the fact that we have an IEP means it's significant enough that has impacted us educationally, right? So it's not just in schools. It's also in workplaces. Our students aren't disclosing disability. So only 19%, which I actually feel like, wow, that's a lot higher than I expected. Students with disabilities have double the unemployment rate than their typical peers. So it's like, okay, gotta fix that. And if we disclose, then we have some protections. If we disclose, then we can link up to some supports in the workplace. And only 5% were receiving accommodations, which legally they're entitled to. Okay? So I go to classes and I talk to students and I say, okay, have any of you ever disclosed disability? Have you disclosed? Tell me, who's disclosed? This school year, in all the senior classes that I've had a presentation with, I've had 2 students say that they disclosed disability. And one girl, I love her story so much because it's now going to be one of my poster stories. But she said, are you good with English or do you have Spanish? Okay, I'm good because we have a translator. Okay, so I said, so tell me, have you ever disclosed disability? And she raises her hand and she says, yes, I've disclosed disability. Tell me about it. She goes, well, I'm a basketball player. And we were playing our game, and the buzzer goes off, it's a timeout, and the coach comes over, and the coach has their little, their whiteboard, and they do their scribble, right? Okay, get ready, and the clock's coming down, and, the stress level's going up, and he draws, he goes, okay, you got it? She goes, no. He draws some more, he goes, okay, you got it? She goes, no. And again, the stress level's going up, and then she goes, I have a disability in the middle of the timeout. Which is not the ideal place, right? The fact that she disclosed, amazing. Not the right setting, right? Not the most ideal. Had she disclosed to her coach in advance? She said, Ms. Josafat, this doesn't work for me. I need him to show me on the court. Imagine proactively disclosing disability so that you could get the support you need so you could be more successful. So it was like an aha for the classroom. Another student this year disclosed disability, and I said, so tell me how it went. He goes, I disclosed to my aunt. And she goes, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you help other people understand where you're coming from and also what might work for you. And that's an empowering space to operate from, to have that confidence. But here goes. And I'm Ms. Josafat, and I'm known for having courageous conversations, which are difficult conversations and conversations people don't always like to have. But I'm a West Side girl, and on the West Side, we really keep it real. And so that's the truth. West Side, we keep it real. And I feel like I owe that to my students, and I owe that to my parents to always be real and be 100 with them. And the fact of the matter is that disability conversations are rarely talked about. Most all the students I talk to say, we don't talk about that in my house. It's a non-topic. It's a taboo topic. Parents will say, but I feel like I'm protecting them from this conversation. That actually adds to that layer of embarrassment or shame or guilt or whatever that we have about having a disability, because if we're not talking about it, it must be bad. It's not bad. It's just part of who we are. But I also realized something else, because again, remember my lens? Your lens changes over time. So I was just a classroom teacher for all this time, and then I became a mom. And then one day, the teacher in my kid's class said, "Miss Josafat," and I will never, ever, ever forget this. My back was to her, and she said, "Miss Josafat, have you talked to Jackson's pediatrician about his speech?" And my whole body felt this feeling in my body, like, what? And I froze, I paused. It was like, huh? I totally respected this teacher. I respected this program. I'm a special educator. And I had the what response? And I realize now, and I'm thankful for that experience, this is where we are sometimes as parents. Someone says, hey, I think our kid has a disability. We are, initially, this was me in the classroom, I was shocked. What do you mean, my kid? Keep in mind, I was translating for my son. He would speak, and I would say, oh, he's saying this. I knew something was going on with his speech. I called my dad on the way home, and I'm like, Dad, not a teacher, Dad, Miss Sarah says something about Jackson's speech and that I should maybe get him evaluated. His response was, there's nothing wrong with him. Nothing wrong. It was like, these things. There's nothing wrong. Okay. Call my brother, no kids, definitely not a teacher. And he says something to the same effect. No, that's just, how little kids talk. Okay. So I sat with it, and then I realized, whoa, there's a whole bunch of feelings that schools don't usually encounter. Because we talk about disability just like we talk about the burrito we ate for lunch yesterday. It's no big deal to us because it's an everyday conversation. And oftentimes, families, we're still here.
How old was your kid when the teacher told you?
Preschool.
Preschool. Okay.
Yes, preschool. And so, we're here. Hi, welcome. Please come in. We're here. But check this out. The entry point for self-advocacy is where? I made a bigger hint, hint. Is that acceptance? Acceptance is the entry point for self-advocacy. And if we as families are still in our feelings, it makes it really hard for us to help our students become empowered, independent self-advocates. And I thought, bingo. Thank you, universe, for teaching me this lesson. Because again, I'd always been on the other side of the table, having conversations with parents. Many of the parents I knew respected my opinions. They knew I cared about their kid. And I would say things, and the response sometimes would be very different than I expected. And I realized schools enter the conversation at a very different place than parents enter, right? Parents enter a diagnosis or even concern or whatever, and then we have the feelings, right? Schools start at action, right? After all, it's called the IEP, the Individual Education Plan, right? Let's get to work, let's plan, let's go, let's do the things. There's a disconnect, and I didn't know it until I had my own experience. Fascinating experience for me. And then I realized too, sometimes what we hear is attached to our feelings. Sometimes what we hear is attached to our feelings. And I'll give some examples. When the teacher said to me, have you considered Jackson for a speech evaluation? What did my dad hear? There's something wrong with Jackson, right? There's nothing wrong with him. Sometimes I have presented options outside of college to families. There's these things. And the response was, so are you saying my kid isn't going to college? Right? The feeling sometimes change things. You know this, if you have a significant other, you say something and they're like, so you're saying this. No, that's not what I said. Right? So what I'd like to propose is Is this perspective or point of view somehow meaningful in my child's journey towards independence? Okay, what is the significance of what they're saying? What's the intention? Is that person sharing this information so your kid can get more help? Is this person sharing this information so they're presented with more resources? Are they sharing this with you because whatever, right? And how can we reframe and reinvest our emotional energy? Those feelings that we have of like, right, that grief, how can we reinvest that so that it supports our student and helps them move forward? Because that's our goal. That's what we want for our kids. So, a couple things I think about. A disability, a learning difference, a label, etc., is only part of a person. It doesn't define who they are. But it's a part of us. It's there. So, but pretending it's not there doesn't serve our students. Having it be a non-topic or a taboo topic or a topic that we feel like we're shielding our kid from isn't supporting them. It's not moving them forward. And I think that just fundamentally lies in our parenting. We want to protect, right? But protect, serve, right? We want to serve. And I will tell you, many of my students will say, Ms. Josafat, no one's really explained my disability. I don't understand it. But I do know when I'm sitting in a classroom and I look around and it looks like everybody else understands what's going on, I know that I'm lost. Do they know why they're lost? Do they know that it's because if teacher gives more than 3 directions, they're stuck? They might have captured 2, but they didn't capture the last one. Do they have that awareness of their learning difference so that they can advocate? So, a disability impacts every single area of one's life, okay? So all my students will say, Ms. Josafat, you know what, I'm just going to go out there, I'm going to really just try my hardest. And remember, I'm part of that 69%. I don't have a disability after high school. I'm leaving it behind me, which you can't do. Doesn't work, right? We can work through it. We can work around it. We can navigate it, but it doesn't go away, okay? Remember that I don't have a disability? That's straight up denial. That's in my denial wheel. That's in my grief wheel, okay? I want to get them to be empowered. My most empowered student that I ever had as a student, he's actually going to school right now to be a teacher, and he was in my class. I was his case manager, and I said, okay, tell me, how did you do this? Like, how are you successful? And he goes, well, I'm not embarrassed about having a disability, and I know what I'm entitled to, and I know what my rights are, and I need the services. I was like, whoa, amazing. No qualms about it. He'll talk about his disability like nothing. Now, I don't suggest walking down the street waving a flag and saying I have a disability. That's not the point. But disclosing appropriately and disclosing proactively is magic for your students. Absolute magic. The tricky part is many of us with disabilities think that we're alone. Our district has 5,000 students with disabilities. While your students walking around feeling like they're all alone, they're walking around with other people that are thinking the exact same thing. There's so many more of us than we realize. But if we're not disclosing and we're not putting ourselves out there, we look like everybody else. The tricky part is we look like everybody else. We really try to fake the funk. We're not faking it very well because the data is not backing us up, right? Disability affects all areas. So I'm a big proponent of disclosure because literally it can affect every single area. Employment, education, personal relationships, encounters with authority figures. Many of my students, the most common learning disability is auditory processing, right? Ears work fine, but our train tracks sometimes are bumpy or slower, right? When we're nervous, does our brain work better or worse? Worse. My students will say, don't ever call on me. That stresses me out. You could ask me 2 + 2 and I'm not going to know it. Okay? When you get pulled over by a police officer and you have auditory processing, your processing is going to slow way down. And now the police officer is rattling off questions and you're not capturing it. And what might the police officer think? You're lying. Why is there a delay? You must be trying to come up with some answer, right? They don't know. You look like everybody else. So disclosure can matter every single place. Every single place. I have ADHD, big time. It's a beautiful thing in a classroom because I've got energy like an Energizer bunny, right? My students love that. But I'll tell you, I was watching a movie the other day and I was explaining to my husband what it's like to have ADHD. The girl comes in on the show and she's holding a coconut water. And this is what my brain did. My brain said, oh, I love that coconut water. I think that's the best coconut water that exists. You can buy it at Sprouts, but it's actually better if I buy it at Costco because I can get the 6-pack and it's cheaper and I save money. And then I go, what was on the movie right now? I completely lost that because my brain made all these beautiful connections to coconut water. I paused the movie and then I explained it to my husband. He goes, it really does that? I go, yeah, that's what my brain does. It's literally like I'm the worst driver because I want to look at everything. My brain sees it all. That's ADHD for me. But I tell you what, my brain works a lot. I used to come up with some of my best lessons right before bed. I'm laying there and the ideas are just shooting in. And I have to stop them and go to sleep. But it can be really challenging for me to sit for an hour and 50-minute block if I'm in a block schedule as a person with ADHD because I gotta move. Okay? But I know that. I have that awareness of myself, right? And I'm able to articulate that. I cannot work in an office. I will lose my mind. It is way too quiet, right? I know that. You have to have that awareness of self. I've met students that say, I want to work at Chuck E. Cheese.
Parents and presenters, please excuse the interruption. This is just a friendly reminder that we want parents and attendees to stay in the classrooms after the session is over in order to view the very important awards ceremony that we have planned for after session 2. Thank you.
The other hard thing about ADHD is when you have an interruption like that, it really throws you off track. And then you go, where was my brain? And again, that's my awareness. And I completely lost my thought. So here is my map for self-advocacy. And this is my map for how to disclose. Please take a picture of it, modify it, do what works for your kid, practice it, level it up, start it slow, build it up. Okay? It doesn't have to be fancy. Done is better than perfect. Practice and get it better. Practice with your student's favorite teacher first so that you know the response is going to be positive. Because it won't always be positive. Some people are going to say, well, you look like everybody else. What do you mean you have a disability? Right? Or I don't think it's fair that you have accommodations. My kid that's going to be a teacher, I asked him, hey, have you ever had a time that a teacher didn't want to accommodate you? He goes, yeah, Berkeley. One of the professors said, I don't think it's fair. So, are you kidding me? So it's not always going to be positive. It's not going to be positive as an employer when you disclose. And my argument is, I might say in response, well, you might not want to work there. Because I want to work at a place that's going to be supportive of me. So disclose to a teacher first. And here's the map. I'm going to do my walking. I have a disability. That is the foundation. Remember, if I don't have a disability, I literally cannot get to the next level. It's a video game. Okay? I have ADHD. It impacts me in the following ways. That's my self-awareness. If your kid doesn't know or you don't know how it impacts them, Google. Right? Look up their disability. Ask the psychologist. How might that manifest for them? Can you give me a list of things? And let your kid highlight. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. That is empowering when you know how your brain works. Then you can tell people, I'm sharing this with you, coach, because I want to be a rock star player. Right? You can support me by, please don't give me those directions during timeout. Send someone else in because I gotta see it in action. Right? Whatever your need is. And then you thank them for working with you. Okay, that's kind of the optional, but I like that because I think that being polite and courteous and all that sort of thing takes students really a long way. So I have a disability, how it impacts me. I'm sharing this with you because I want to be blank. I want to be successful in your class. I want to be a great employee. I want to be a great wife. I want to be a whatever, okay? And what I need from you. if I forget something, could you just let me know? Because I might not even realize I forgot. If we don't disclose and we're just sort of going through the motions, the perception sometimes is, well, you're lazy. You must not care about this job because you're forgetting stuff or whatever, right? The perception changes as opposed to disclosing and then finding the tips and the tricks that work for us. Imagine if we did this. You don't even have to have a disability to do this, right? But this is self-advocacy. That's my Josafat map of self-advocacy. The point is acceptance. We have to accept it. How can we build on our budding self-advocacy for our students? Chores, giving them choices, giving them say, doing with, not for. With, not for. We do too much for our kids. And I know it takes way longer to do it with them. It's just easier if I just do it myself. Yes, but easier doesn't get you the outcome you want. Independent, empowered, self-advocate. We're in a restaurant and my kid orders this little drink and it has some love on the top and he goes, Mom, how'd they do that? I said, well, let's go find out. We go, he asked. You keep building on that. They better be ordering for themselves at a restaurant. If they bring fries instead of a salad, they need to say, excuse me, ma'am, you brought me fries and you didn't bring me my salad. Okay, self-advocacy begins everywhere. My number one, the students who participate in extracurriculars, wow, the growth, huge, y'all, huge. Disability disclosure, adulting opportunities. You know all that mail you get, and then you sort it and you decide what's a scam, what's important, what's immediate, what's whatever. Do that with them. Help them figure out, is this for real? Is this something that just gets recycled? Is this something that appears important, but it's not? Do your thinking out loud with them, right? Talk out loud your thoughts and your critical thinking. Teach them how to call people. If another student texts me, yo, I'm going to have a real big problem. Appropriate communications for the setting, right? I told you, I'm a West Side girl, but I'm still a teacher. So you need to approach me in that way. And they need to know how to appropriately communicate with people in all different settings. If you want more, this guy is amazing. He has a workbook on empowering students with hidden disabilities. I love what he talks about. If you feel like I need to dig more, I think his book's about $30. Like his book. If there's a teacher that you're like, you know what, I know this teacher loves to learn and whatever, gift them that. It could change their whole approach on students with disabilities and then also with you. The last thing I want to do is sort of just open it up to any thoughts, ahas, questions, wonderings, anything that you might have in this area. As you can see, it's like an exciting area for me because I know it can make a huge difference with our students. So, thoughts?
You mentioned about the characteristics of ADHD. A good example could be like if you're studying something and you get distracted. Not really.
It just depends on the person. Every person is different. So I'll go into classrooms, for example, and here's something that happens with a lot of our students. The brain is like train tracks. You experience this too, even as a disabled or non-disabled person. Some days the train tracks are on point, and you're like, man, I'm flying today. Woo, you feel good. And the next day you're like, man, why did I come in the kitchen? Right? The train tracks are off. People with disabilities, the train tracks are very inconsistent. So the math teacher might say, but yesterday you knew how to do it. Yesterday you sat in your seat. That was yesterday. That was last class. So recognizing how there's ebbs and flows in our brains is important. Understanding that with processing deficits, we might not hear things in their entirety, right? So just understanding more of your child's disability goes a long way. Most of my students, the most they've ever been able to do is say, Ms. Josafat, I have disability. It just takes me longer to learn things. That is a very basic level of self-awareness. Basic level. They need to know details. What just doesn't work? What works better? What works best for me? And then be able to say that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Self-advocacy is the biggest indicator, in my opinion, for post-secondary success. If you can advocate, even if you are a low-level student, you are in a 1,000 times better place than even an academically more capable student who doesn't advocate. Those asking questions, speaking up, clarifying things, that's powerful stuff. And building that confidence in them about themselves. Having a disability isn't a bad thing. It just is. We have to get rid of that guilt and that shame and that embarrassment and whatever emotional stuff we carry, because we don't have control over it anyway. We don't have control over it. So I'm more in the camp of like, all right, let's head on. Here we go. Let's do this. And then find the ways to make it work. That's kind of my whole shebang for you today. I think that's it because of our time, but I, of course, will stay around and answer any questions or anything you may have. Thank you for contributing. Students even, I'm sure you're like, wow, interesting, right? Some new stuff there. So
Thank you.
you're very welcome. Thank you.
And I think we want to watch here the awards, the closure.
Yeah, how do I do that? Am I supposed to do that?
That's a good question. Maybe we can call the technician.
Yeah, they did not tell me.
Every school nominated students and parents.
Let's see.
Is that moving because?
Yeah?
I have no idea. All I knew I was coming to present today. I didn't know that there was something I'm supposed to.
Yo tengo mamás que son adultas. Tengo mamás que ya salieron. Si quieres estar
Means like, you can lose them or they can leave easily and they can easily find a place. Which just means like, if they were to go away, it would be easy to replace them. So sure replaces them. Oh yeah,
No
saying
clue.
like if he died or he like left for the Marine Corps or something, then it would be replaced. Like basically saying like some
Let me check my email and see if there's a.
Y Padilla, ¿dónde se va?
It's like when needed answers. Space the answer.
Pues realmente como en línea. Maybe you can share a speaker. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what we need.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah.
We were running behind.
Oh.
Any important points, like in the beginning, like on the first, second slide?
Well, did you see this one?
No.
We were looking at the data on disclosure, post-secondary, so out of high school. 69% of students with disabilities no longer considered themselves to have a disability. They did not disclose, and this was why. I don't consider myself to have a disability. I actually think that that's not true. I think they're just operating in denial, right? Right? 7% recognized it but didn't disclose. And probably because they're like, I just want to try this. I just want to do this independent of my disability, right? But high school and college, ooh, it's a leap, right? You've got to link up to supports. And then if you need them, they're there. If you don't, all good. But you've got to have them in your back pocket. Because what a lot of students do is they don't disclose. They end up in a big situation, and now all of a sudden they're like, help! But it's way easier for me to teach you how to swim than to save you when you're drowning. So that's the perspective that I kind of come from. So
When was that data taken?
this is from, let's see.
What about the ones that fall through the cracks and never get detected if they had a disability?
Well, see, that's the other thing, is that There are so many students and people who aren't diagnosed. Many, many, many. My background is I would co-teach classes. So there was a special educator in the room, a general ed teacher, and we had mixed class, gen ed, special ed. I would usually like scan the room, and I'm looking at the first week of class, and I'm like, okay, who's your case manager? And the student would say, case manager? I'm like, yeah, who writes your IEP? And they go, what's an IEP? I'm like, okay, no. But I was automatically, I call it my sped dar. My sped radar is like anywhere. I'm like, I can identify my people, because that's just what I do. That's my field, right? There are many that aren't labeled, or many parents, right, who, when it's brought up, they are here and they don't consent to evaluation. That doesn't take away your kid's disability. That is a huge disservice to our kid. Huge, huge. But that is not uncommon. Or they delay it. Let's just see it. And by the way, this is not limited to just parents. This is also, I've seen a school psychologist, I've had this conversation, my peers in special education. Denial is grief, and that wheel is so strong that it doesn't matter, even if they're teachers or they're in the field and all that stuff, it still happens even for them. Fascinating for me. I just was asked a couple weeks ago by one of my friends, can you meet with me? My son's having a hard time in his class, and And I said, well, has he been evaluated yet? And she danced around it so much. And I thought, wow, she's asking me to meet with her, to talk to her, and yet she doesn't even want to have her kid evaluated. It's like, why not? And the worst that happens is you know your kid a little bit more. Get some answers. So then you can get to a space of action. So I think you might have you've seen the yeah. I'm working on it. I'm trying at this point now. You go into senior classes, which is too late in my opinion, right? You want to start real young when we're talking about and knowing ourselves and being able to advocate for ourselves. But if you think about it, look at our grades. There's an issue. What do? We, as parents, email the teacher. No. If there's a question, student's going to email the teacher, and the student's going to ask questions and CC you on the email, right? We have to teach them to do the things, right? Even if it's beside you, even if you're coaching them through the phone call or coaching them through the email, doing those things together with, not for, because come college, there's none of that. But yet we think that they're just going to be fine, right? So we have to help them become independent. We're not going to be around forever. That's the reality of the situation, right? We're not. And culturally, sometimes that comes into play a lot, like I see parents do way too much. Like the, pobrecito mentality. That is not going to work for your kid. Like at all. I said, half my family's Mexican. I say the same thing with Filipinos. My husband's Filipino. Wow, I've never seen so much enabling in my life. So, no. We have to help them be independent and sit back, let them stumble, and then support them and support them so that they're confident in doing these things. They need to return something, you go in the store and you return it. You get money for your birthday, you got to deposit at the bank, you go and you deposit it. We do it for them. We do way too much for our kids.
That's how we do that with the regular kids.
That's going to mention
Yeah.
Totally.
It's the same with the teens or our kids.
Yeah.
My kids are always like, Mom, can you please go here? Can you
No.
please go and return this? And
Right.
and they're 30 years old.
Kids are all new kids.
Yeah.
They were babies.